Hello, everyone. Um, I'm AJ, and I'm the live stream coordinator for the Columbus Cartoon Coalition. Unfortunately, it looks like the guests that I had planned to join for today's live stream were not able to make it. So it'll just be me today to continue our discussion about producing merchandise. And since it is just me, I can answer any questions you want and really tailor the conversation to whoever is watching the live stream. So please feel free to leave your comments if there's a specific piece of merch that you want to talk about. Feel free to drop it, and I will do the best that I can with the knowledge that I have. So there is one specific piece of merchandise in particular that we were not able to get through during part one of our merchandise live stream that we will start with discussing today, and that is pins. So there are really two main types of pins to know about. We have buttons. So this kind of pin is typically referred to as a button. It is circle in shape, and the back has like a safety pin in it like this. And these are typically the cheaper kind of buttons to make. You can get them made through a manufacturer, or you can actually buy a button maker and do it yourself. So this is a really easy one to do yourself. And then the other kind of pin we have are enamel pins, which look more like this. They can actually be cut into nearly any shape you want. They're usually smaller in size because these are more expensive to make. You can find larger ones, but they are typically very pricey. And the back has a pin that looks like this, and you can have a clasp on the end. These has two pins with rubber backs. I find this kind of clasp is a bit nicer. So as I mentioned, these are more expensive to make, and they're not the kind of thing that you can really do yourself because of the materials involved. So you do have to work with a manufacturer to do these kinds of pins. This is actually a pin that I produced myself through a company called the Enamel Pin Factory. That's the only enamel pin manufacturer that I have experience with. And the product did turn out very well. And I didn't have a bad experience. It's just pricey, but that's kind of the nature of making enamel pins. The other thing that's important to know with enamel pins is there's actually two different kinds of enamel pins. This is not something that I knew when I was going into making enamel pins, and it's definitely something that you want to keep in mind. So there's actually two kinds of enamel: soft enamel and hard enamel. And the pins that I just showed you are examples of each one. So this is a soft enamel pin. You can tell that it's soft enamel because the colored parts kind of look like they're sunk in and the lines are popping out. So it has a different look because it's kind of in two layers. The lines stand out and the colored parts are sunk in. And that's the kind of effect you get with soft enamel. And this is hard enamel. So if I were to actually rub my finger across it, there is a tiny bit of difference between how the line feels versus where the color feels, but for most part, it's very flat. But it is nice and shiny, and still has a good look to it. So this is hard enamel if you're looking for this kind of look. So when you are working with a pin manufacturer, you want to make sure that you're selecting the right kind of pin. Some things to keep in mind when you're designing enamel pins too. As I said, they're kind of expensive just to begin with, but there are certain design choices that will greatly affect the price. So you want to keep this in mind when you're designing. The more colors you add in the pin, the more expensive it is. That's why this pin only has 3 colors. because when I was working with the enamel pin factory, 3 colors was their kind of default. But if I wanted more than 3 colors, I would have to pay extra. The other thing that can cost extra is cutouts. So that's kind of like this shape in the dragon's tail. That's a cutout. So if you have any holes in your design, that stuff can cost extra. In fact, these 2 little divots where the dragon's wings are kind of close to the face, those were small enough areas that they had to be done as cutouts. Um, so it cost extra. So actually having something that's shaped like this, where there's not a lot of negative space, is going to be better in that regard because you're not going to have to pay for those extra cutouts. And of course, the other thing that affects the price is size. This is small. This is a bigger one. And the bigger one might need to have multiple pins. And so that kind of stuff, of course, costs extra. And we are being photobombed by my cat, Charlotte. Say hello, Charlotte. So that was pretty much all I have to say about enamel pins. So let's actually go back to buttons for a minute, these kinds of button pins. So I briefly mentioned that these are a good option because they are cheaper than enamel pins, and there's something that you can do DIY if you buy a button maker or have access to a button maker, or you can work with a manufacturer to get buttons made. So what's nice about buttons is, unlike the stuff where the enamel pins, where you have to really consider the design and make sure you're not having too many cutouts or too many colors, because that's really going to affect the price. With buttons, it's much easier because you have one shape. It's always going to be a circle. And on that circle, you can put as many colors and stuff in the design as you want, as long as it fits on your circle template. The one thing you have to keep in mind with buttons is when you're designing it, just leaving a little bit of bleed area, because part of the design does get kind of wrapped around the back of the button through the creation process. So as for where to go to get your buttons manufactured, I actually don't have any experience personally working with a button manufacturer. I've had the pleasure where I've always been able to work with a button maker. I actually don't own a button making machine myself, but in college, my roommate had one that they would let me use, which was very nice. And now actually my workplace has a button maker that I can use. And for those of you who are in the Central Ohio area, the Delaware County District Library has button makers available to use, and it just costs like 10 cents a button, I think. The price does depend on the size of the button you make, but they have a couple button makers that you can use, and the buttons there are very cheap. So that's a great option for making cheap, affordable buttons. The other thing that's kind of nice about using a button maker is you can do the classic pin back like this, but actually you can also get materials that work with a button maker that will make a magnet button like this. So this has a magnet back, but it has that same look as this pin back button because they're made through the same process. So if you do invest in a button maker, you can also get supplies to make magnets, which is pretty cool. So now that's a good way to transition into magnets. So magnets are not something I have a ton of experience with, but I thought I would cover it because I do have some examples of magnets. One of them, of course, is the this kind of magnet, which you can make with a button maker, which is pretty cool. I also recently found out you can get printable magnet paper. So that's the other example magnet I have here. You can tell this magnet is way thinner and also very bendy because it's actually a magnet paper that you can print on and then cut into whatever shape you want. So that's another like DIY option for making your own magnets. The other thing that's kind of fun about magnets is if you are someone who's into DIY, you can turn almost any creation into a magnet just by getting those like sticky magnet stickers and sticking them on whatever you want. I actually don't have an example with me, but something I've recently been experimenting with is creating perler bead designs and turning them into magnets by doing exactly what I was talking about, of just like sticking magnet stickers on them. Okay. I think my cat wants to play with my merch examples. I have quite a few examples of like keychains and buttons here. And of course, my cat sees any small thing and wants to immediately play with it. Yeah, magnet paper is pretty cool. I believe you can get small sheets of it, like regular, like 8.5 by 11 sheets, but I also know you can get like big rolls of it. So that's pretty cool. And then of course there is the option of finding a magnet manufacturer and working with them. But once again, that's just not something I personally have experience with. I like to do a lot of DIY stuff, as you probably learned if you watched the last stream and as you'll see today. So quite a few of the examples I have to show are things that I had a hand in making myself, which I think is pretty neat. So we've talked about buttons, enamel pins, magnets. Let's talk about keychains. We'll do that next. So I talked a bit in the last live stream. We actually ended it by talking about acrylic charms, which are a kind of keychain where there's an image in the middle and acrylic on each side. These are actually new acrylic keychains that I just got in the mail today. So you guys on the live stream are like the first people to see me unveil these acrylic charms. These are the charms that I made as part of my Valhalla Awaits project that some of you may know about because I did a couple live streams about it. And these were made through Vograce, which is a charm manufacturer that I would really recommend. I've bought charms that were made for them before, and they're really good. I also just want to highlight Vograce because I think one of the things they're most well known for is their acrylic charms, but they actually do lots of different kinds of merchandise. You can get stickers through Vograce, acrylic standees. You can also get different kinds of charms. Like this is a very basic acrylic charms, but you may have seen shaky charms, which actually have like little charms and bits in it that you can like shake up and it's like a toy. And there's also like CD charms where it actually looks like a CD and you can move it around. Okay, it actually looks like Kelsey is here now, so I'm going to let them join in so they can come into the conversation.
Hi, I am so sorry that I'm late. I just got home. Story of my life for the last 3 weeks. So we'll just keep it at that. Anyway, hello. Thank you for having me as a guest today.
Yes. Okay. I'm glad you could make it, even though you were late. I'm just glad that you're here and you're safe.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's the last couple of weeks, man.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yes. So I heard you mention, since I know we are discussing different merch items.
Yes.
I heard you mentioning little CD shakeups and a few other shakeups. I missed the first 10, 15 minutes of this. I'm so sorry. But what else was covered?
So we actually we went over button pins, enamel pins, magnets.
Okay.
And then I was doing a little review on acrylic charms because I was going to transition into talking about keychains. And I was kind of saying like, this is one kind of keychain. And we did talk about acrylic charms a little bit in our last meeting, but I have another example of like a keychain you can do here. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because what's great about keychains is it's such a, like, broad category that you can do lots of different kinds.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
so, like, I was going to show an example of a little motel keychain that I
Yeah.
made.
Nice.
And this kind of stuff is really easy to do DIY because what we did is bought blank motel keychains.
Okay.
Um, and then this is all vinyl that was cut out with the Cricut and then
Mhm.
stuck
Mhm.
on the keychain.
Gotcha. Nice.
Yeah. Do you have any experience doing different kinds of keychains?
Most of the keychains that I got in the past were done by an outside party, usually Vogue Race.
Mhm.
I will say I have tried the Sticker Mule keychains. I actually prefer the Vogue Race quality over the Sticker Mule keychains. Part of that is because, in my experience, Sticker Mule, whatever they use to latch the keychain loops onto the acrylic part, did not stick. It would always like bust open.
Mhm.
There's also the issue that the keychains that I got from Sticker Mule were often not double-sided printing. It was just single-sided. So the backside of it would look like this like white cutout version of it,
Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
was not overly fond of. Vogue Race does allow for double-sided printing. Now
Mhm.
that said, because of gestures broadly at everything, I'm not sure that I can recommend Vogue Race right now because they are based overseas. They are headquartered in China, so I'm not sure that I can recommend them at this time because gestures broadly at everything at the moment. We are recording this in March of 2025. So,
Well,
um,
actually, the example, that I was just showing, were
mhm,
the charms that I just ordered from Vogue Race. They came here
mhm.
surprisingly fast,
Good.
because I was worried about, shipping issues because it is from overseas, but I
Mhm.
think it just took a little over a week for them
Oh, good.
here. Um,
Glad to
so
hear that.
yeah, and they turned out great. Um,
Mhm. Good. Yeah, if you're able to work with Vogue Race, viewer at home, highly recommend working with them. They're great quality. Actually, I know I just packed this away because I'm actually preparing to move apartments within the next like 2 months. But I can go grab a particular keychain that I got printed um, a while back ago. I have a sample. I will be right back.
okay. For the audience members, a couple tips that I wanted to give regarding working with Vogue Race or anything overseas where it's likely the shipping is going to take a long time. And also, like, overseas shipping is usually expensive. So for things like that, it's usually more cost effective to do a larger order and try to get like as much merch as you can from that manufacturer at the same time. And one of the things that's nice about Vogue Race, as I was talking about, they make lots of different kinds of merch. So if you're thinking of getting multiple things from Vogue Race, order it all as one big order so you don't have to worry about all these different shipments and paying for shipping lots of different times. You can just try to get it as one. I even know some people who would um, like team up with their friends to do big Vogue Race orders so that they wouldn't
Yep.
have to pay as much for shipping. So
Yep. Yep.
those are
Because
some
the
tips.
the other thing about Vogue Race is that they let you do variants of the same sort of design in the same order. So, like, for example, I had some Mr. Dino Pride keychains made up, and the changing variable was the flag pattern, but everything else about the design was the same. And they were willing to work with me to get keychains made that kept the same shape but changed the flag pattern for each one, which was fantastic, and did that in the same order too. I wanted to show off here this double-sided holographic biblically accurate cat. I love how this turned out. This is another item from Vogue Race. This is their, I believe, their star holographic. Yes, their star holographic, because if you look super closely, there are star holographics in there.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know if it's shown on camera. Hopefully it is.
I
But
can see it. So yes, we are getting it.
fantastic.
When it
Yes.
hits the light, it looks very
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Yeah. Got 50 of these for one order, and it was like reasonably priced. I don't remember the exact price off the top of my head because that was like 2-3 years ago, but they turned out fantastic. And like I said, 2-3 years ago, and it's still holding up,
And that's
which
always a
is
great sign. Yeah.
heck yeah. Heck yeah. Cannot recommend Vogue Grace enough.
Yeah.
Vogue Grace is great.
And I gotta say, with keychains in particular, like the quality, I feel like matters even more because if you're actually having this thing on your keys or attached to a backpack or something like that, where it's probably going to be like smacking a bunch of other stuff as you just like go about your day, you want a quality keychain that's not just going to like get scratched up or damaged super easily. Um,
Exactly.
yes.
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments or questions about keychains?
Well, I was about to ask, since I think you mentioned we talked about buttons previously, like the circular buttons with the pin on the back. Is that what you were talking
Yes.
about? Perfect. Okay. Because I was about to discuss that a little bit if you weren't going to.
And I made sure to bring them because we didn't get around to pins last time, and I know that's a common merch item, so
Yep.
I did.
Yep. I know for when I was first getting into the convention scene, there was this kind of implication that like if you really wanted to make the big moolah, that you should get your own button maker. But nowadays I don't see people traveling with button makers anymore, but I do see more and more library spaces offering button makers as part of their like maker workshop spaces. Cuz
Yeah.
I can't speak to Columbus, but I can speak about Toledo. Toledo area, their main branch of the library has a maker studio, which includes a button maker, a little button press that you just provide the materials, you book your time slot, and you can just go to town and make all of the buttons.
Yeah. Actually, the one library that I shouted out is the Delaware County District Library, which is just like 30-minute drive from Columbus, has a button maker. And I've gone there before to make buttons. And it is way cheaper than getting them from like an online manufacturer. So that's definitely
Yeah,
the way to go if you can find something like that in your area. Or I
exactly.
do know some people will invest in one themselves. They're not terribly expensive. Um,
They're not. I will say, if you're going to press them yourself, expect some trial and error because there
this is
there
true.
will be some buttons that will not come out correctly.
Yes. Um,
So just prepare for that materials wise.
yes, yes. Um, I've noticed in particular, like the metal backs, you can usually like reuse even if you messed it up, but the little like plastic that goes on the
Mm-hmm.
outside, if
Yeah.
you mess that up, then it's like wrinkled and you can't use it again. So,
Yep.
and that's the material you might need to buy extra of if you are planning on making your buttons the DIY way.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Uh, Going back to keychains, I've heard some people mention shrinky dinks. If that is still a thing, you have my blessing. Go forth. I have not come across very many shrinky dink supplies out in the wild. So
Yeah.
I'm
Well, they're
guessing people are getting
definitely
them from Amazon. I don't know.
yeah, I'm like it's definitely still a thing. I don't think shrinky dinks are as popular as they were like when I was a kid, but
Mm,
actually I know we're planning a shrinky dink project at the library where I work. So that's very much a
nice.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and what's great about keychains too is I kind of said the same thing about magnets. Is
Mm.
it's one of those things that comes in so many forms that you can find a way to make a keychain out of almost anything.
Oh, heck
Um,
yeah.
so, because I mean, I also have experience making resin keychains. You can just buy
Mm-hmm.
some like empty key rings and some like jewelry making supplies and put some cute charm keychains together yourself.
Yep.
So many different ways of making keychains.
Yep. And different ways of magnets. Like I'm just thinking of the example of well, Alex moved out, but before she moved out, she had these magnets that were basically stickers that she had purchased at comic conventions that she then put onto like magnet sheets and then cut the magnet part out and made the stickers into magnets instead.
Yeah. Well, that's cool too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So,
feel like
if
that's
you're on a
probably
budget, and I know that at least Michael's previously sold like 8.5 by 11 sheets of magnets
yeah, yeah.
that you could
That's
just
what
cut.
this is that I briefly talked about. This was made with a printable magnet paper
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then just cut out.
Yep.
Um, so that's pretty
Cool.
neat because I feel like most people wouldn't even realize that like magnet paper is a thing. But
I
it
did
is.
not know magnet paper was a thing.
Yeah. Um, okay. If anybody who's watching this from home continues to have questions about keychains or magnets or something we've already gone over, or you want us to go more in depth on something, feel free
Mhm.
to put that question in the comments. But I think we're ready to move on to the
Give the
next.
kitty lots of hugs for me.
I know she wants to play with all of like the keychains and buttons that I laid out for my demos. She just thinks
Mm-hmm.
they're toys.
Yeah.
Um, Although it's funny because my next merch item that I actually have to show off was inspired by my cat. So,
Oh,
um,
delightful.
because the next thing I want to talk about is apparel.
Oh,
So, making your own shirts, hats, tote bags. Those are probably some of the most common ones.
yes.
Um, and I brought some example tote bags to show off.
Ooh.
So, there's kind of two main ways to create your own apparel,
Mm-hmm.
either with like iron-ons
Yes.
or oh, now I'm forgetting the word, the kind of printing.
Balloons.
I think me doing this maybe made the balloons come up. I don't know how the balloons happened, guys. Uh,
Okay.
Normally, if you do a certain like hand gesture, that will like make the emoji react to do its thing. Um,
Wild. I've never seen that, but okay.
I remembered the word I was forgetting. Screen printing.
Yes.
Right? So the
Mm-hmm.
two main options are like iron-ons or screen printing, and I brought examples of both. Um,
Okay.
so this was the one inspired by my cat, of course, as you can probably
Aw.
guess. Um,
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
and this was made with an iron-on vinyl. Um, so you can tell that it's a vinyl because this has a very different look and texture than the rest of the bag. Like this is just a cheap canvas tote bag. The
Yeah.
vinyl, of course, it's shiny. You can kind of see in the light. And it
Mm-hmm.
just feels different. And of course, it's got a white background. Like it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be all white on the back. Whereas screen printing has a totally different look to it.
Yes.
Right? It's not kind of that hard, shiny material that the vinyl is because it is ink going
Mm-hmm.
directly onto the paper. And this isn't as bright of a white as the other white was
Yeah.
because it's an ink on a dark background, so it's not totally opaque.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
White ink on dark fabric. Turns out it turns dark.
yes. So the iron-on one was one that I did myself.
Mm-hmm.
This was done with through a manufacturer because I do not know how to screen print.
Oh,
Um
I do. It takes up a lot of space.
yeah. If you know how to screen print, if you have the resources to screen print and you can do it yourself, that's great. You'll probably save lots of money.
Yeah.
Or you can work with a manufacturer. So I think we have a question in the chat about someone who is unsure what screen printing is. So it is a printing process where you add ink onto it can actually be onto a piece of paper, onto a piece of fabric. Like you can also screen print artworks, and I've seen people do screen printing for their comic covers and stuff, but you basically add the ink on in layers, and each color of ink is a different layer that you add on.
Yeah. The way that here's how I would describe it. So, what you do is you take a wood frame, it's empty, save for a silk screen that you design your design on. And unlike with iron on transfers, you can have the silkscreen design not mirrored. It can be just straightforward, like the design. It doesn't have to be the mirrored version of it. Because what you're doing is you're taking that silk screen on the wood frame, you're putting it on the fabric or your paper, and then you're going to put this is how I was taught how to do it. You take your ink in a straight line across the top, and then you take your wedge and you just down. It might
Okay.
take a couple of layers depending on
Yeah.
how bright you want it to look, but yeah.
So I want to clarify something because you said that with iron-ons you have to print them in reverse. So I actually did not have to print my iron-on in reverse. It might depend what material you're reusing, but for the iron-on vinyl I used, you could just print it normally. However, if you use a sublimation printer or a sublimation process, that has to be done in reverse. So
Gotcha.
I guess sublimation would count as a third way that you can do your own apparel. I actually have a pillow right behind me. Oh, actually, it's kind of far away. I'm gonna run and grab it because I actually do have an example of a pillow that I made using sublimation, so I can show off that
Cool.
method.
Fantastic. And that's not even getting into one of my favorite ways of putting a design on a t-shirt is to just paint it straight on. And how you would do that is you would take like acrylic paint and you would combine it with GAC 900, which is a binding agent that you can find in the acrylic binder section with the acrylic paints. But you can combine acrylic ink and GAC 900 in equal parts, and then you can just paint a design directly on the surface that you're painting on.
Very cool.
It's one of my favorite ways.
So this pillow was made with sublimation. So if you have access to a sublimation printer, you can actually print any design you want that you can then use heat to transfer onto a different surface. Or this was actually made with sublimation paper. So there are papers you can buy that are pre-printed with sublimation ink. You can get ones that are just a solid color, or you can get ones like this, which are kind of a different like pattern or texture or whatever. This came from a set that was all like watercolor papers. And then the design was cut into the paper with a Cricut cutting machine. And then we use heat to transfer it onto the pillowcase.
Nice.
So that is another way to do it. I find that sublimation and iron-on are pretty user-friendly if like you want to learn the DIY process of doing it. Screen printing, as Kelsey already mentioned, requires a lot of space, a lot of supplies. There's definitely more of a learning curve there. Whereas like iron-ons are things that like you can just buy the special iron-on paper and print it yourself. And then as the name suggests, you can use an iron to iron it on, but the couple projects that I just showed were done using a heat press, which is a little nicer because it just gets it done in one go. And actually, if you find that you like doing iron-on sublimation, Cricut, the same brand that makes the cutting machines, also makes heat presses in various sizes that aren't too expensive.
Yep. And they might be available at Joann's still, depending on if your Joann's is still open before they completely close out of business. See if you can snag yourself a good deal there.
That's true. If you can get those going out of business sales, that might be a good way to do it.
Yep.
So yeah, and I also want to just reiterate that like the processes we're talking about, although like the examples I showed were tote bags, you can use this exact same method to put a design on a shirt, um,
Mm-hmm.
or however you want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. You can also, this is more for making prints on paper, but there's also a process called lino cut that you
Mm.
take a sheet of like, I want to say linoleum, but at Michael's, they're the pink blocks. Um, and you can carve a design into them, lay on a layer of ink onto that, and then put your paper on top of it, and then use a roller to press it down. With that process, you do want it mirror flipped so that it pops up the right direction in the final printing. But
Yes, yes.
yes,
Um,
I actually have a stamp that I carved for, I have it in a drawer over here. Because for a little while I was hand stamping my business cards. 1 second.
it is like your own rubber stamp. We got a comment from Chandu. It is like making your own rubber stamp. In fact, I've seen people who use it to make their own rubber stamps, and that's kind of how they brand their work, is they make like a custom stamp and put that on the back of all their prints. Something like what Kelsey is holding up. I actually knew someone who did like a special thing at a con where if you bought something from their table, you got to make your own sticker. And their make your own stickers was that they had a bunch of pre-made like print blocks that you could then
Mm-hmm.
stick into ink, put it on sticker paper, cut it out yourself, and then you had a sticker that you had just printed yourself, which is pretty cool.
Heck
Uh,
yeah.
that's also like a clever idea to do at a con, because how many people at cons have like a do your own stamp sticker station? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what a fun idea. That's like a
Hello,
good way
people.
to make your table stand out.
Yeah. A neat little gimmick to draw the eyeballs in.
Mm-hmm. Kelsey, do you have any thoughts about making apparel that we didn't get to?
Oh, I can talk a little bit about working with outside vendors on apparel, because I've only worked with outside vendors a handful of times. Vistaprint will do if you're in a pinch, but I would not recommend them long term. Um, I never tried Sticker Mules printing because by the time I got around to figuring it out, there was some stuff about the CEO that I was like, I'm not enabling that. So, um, can't attest to the quality of Sticker Mules apparel to that end. I will say there are other online vendors who will print t-shirts for you.
Mhm.
That said, um, it can be a little trickier to get multiple colors in screen printing. Because with screen printing, I mentioned the wood frame with the silk screen with the design on it. If you want multiple colors on there, you have to have multiple screens
Mhm.
to lay stuff down. And that's very labor intensive. So that's another reason why, if you're doing it at home, expect it to take up a lot of space. So, all of that said, you can get a professional from like in a separate warehouse to do that for you if you were interested. But it really depends on the design that you're working with as far as what the best printer would be to work with. I have never worked with a Cricut machine, full transparency. So I mean, if you can get a Cricut machine to work, great. um, that's kind of my thoughts on it, but I've never worked with a Cricut before. Um, there are also some print on demand services that you can use that will print X amount of inventory for you and send it to you for like half the sale price. Um, Printful is one of those services that will do that, but honestly, I would just recommend just keeping it in house as much as you can.
Yeah. You actually reminded me of a few more things that I wanted to say.
Mm.
Because your point about like if you have more colors in screen printing, it costs more because you have to have extra screens.
Yep.
Same thing goes for if you want to do double-sided, like if you want to have a design on both the front and back of a t-shirt, that's of
Yep.
course going to cost extra because it uses more ink. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Other thing you have to keep in mind with something like t-shirts specifically is if you're going to be selling t-shirts, you have to stock multiple sizes. Um,
Yep. And that takes a lot of space.
Yes. So, my tip, especially if you're kind of a beginner and just getting into this, is to start with something like tote bags, which is one size fits all. And people love to collect tote bags that can use them for their groceries. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that's something very easy. With tote bags, there are many different styles. Like you can start with just the very basic, cheap ones. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but if you find that like your tote bags are selling really well, maybe you can invest in the fancy ones that have like a zipper or an inside pocket, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
of course, those tote bags are going to cost a little more, but I think if you're like just starting out and just kind of want to practice what it would be like to create merchandise, just
Yep.
a simple tote bag or something like that would be great.
Yes. Yeah, you don't want to jump into t-shirts right away. Because I knew comic artists who did that and regretted it immediately.
Yes.
Because then they were stuck with like a storage unit full of t-shirts that they had no idea what to do with.
Mhm. I think maybe if you do wanna delve into t-shirts, you could maybe try doing, like, an online pre-order as opposed to jumping right into, like, selling them at cons and then having to
Yep.
bring all the different t-shirts to a con, which is gonna be a lot to carry. If you do
Mm-hmm.
online pre-orders, then you're gonna know how many t-shirts need to be made and exactly in what sizes they need to be made because people
Yep.
will say that information when they pre-order.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's like a good way to test the waters if you do want to experiment with t-shirt making.
Yes. Yeah. Um, Anybody who knows of Kathleen Illustrated, if you do not, she is one of those crafty, artsy people who also does a lot of thrift flips. She did a t-shirt print run with some t-shirts that she bought in bulk at a thrift store because I guess a warehouse had closed and dropped all of their tie-dye shirt inventory at one of the thrift stores that she usually goes to.
Wow.
And she just bought out their whole stock and was like, okay, I'm going to print my design on these specific t-shirts and sell it online. And I'm only going to have a certain number of this size available, a certain amount of this size available, et cetera, et cetera. So she made it work. But
Mhm.
yeah, easiest way to do t-shirts would be doing a pre-order. But again, would not recommend jumping into the t-shirt game right away, especially if your passion project is comics. Just focus on the comics, man.
Mhm.
That's my
And
thought.
just in general, because I know a lot of people here, their passion and specialty is making comics.
Yep.
If you can find merch, like create merch that relates to your comics, I feel like that's going to help it sell well because then you can kind of sell things in bundles, or if someone likes the comic, you can be like, "Oh, buy this mug that goes with the comic, right, or matches it in some way." Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yes,
Yeah, like if there's like an iconic character that drinks out of a particular mug with this dedicated design on it, like every strip or something, yeah, that's usually a good go-to like merch item right there.
yes.
Um, Stuff like that.
Um, and I actually specifically brought up mugs, because the last thing on my personal list to go through is cups and mugs. And
Okay.
this was the last thing that I had planned to go to, but I know we have a few people watching live. So if you have any other things that we haven't covered that you want us to talk about, make sure you
Mm-hmm.
mention it in the comments.
Yes.
Um, but mugs are fun. I love collecting mugs. Um,
What is that
sitting,
design?
it
Oh,
is
cute.
a cat riding a sandworm, and it says meow.
Okay.
Um, this was a Christmas gift. I did not make this myself, but I brought it because I knew that this was like a handmade thing on Etsy, and this was probably made through the sublimation process, right? Which we
Yep.
just talked about sublimation when it comes to t-shirt design. And actually, that same process is often used to make mugs. You
Mm-hmm.
can print with sublimation ink onto paper, wrap it around the mug,
Mm-hmm.
put it in a special like mug press. So I
Yep.
mentioned like using a heat press for creating tote bags and t-shirts. And it's that same kind of thing, but they have mug shaped ones that you can put a mug in and your paper in and heat it up real hot for a few minutes. And that
Mm-hmm.
transfers the ink to the mug and you get a design like this.
Yes.
Um, and just kind of like what I was talking about with the pillow.
Mm-hmm.
You can do something like this, which because of the complexity of this design, I can tell this was printed with a sublimation printer and then transferred onto here. But they do have pre-printed sublimation papers that are meant for mugs. So you can
Mm-hmm.
basically cut your design into the sublimation paper, put it around the mug, um, and create it that way.
Okay.
Um, And I know I'm talking mainly about mugs, but you can actually do tumblers the same way. Like there are
Yep.
various different kinds of cups and things that you can make with the same process. The thing you
Mm-hmm.
have to remember though is you have to purchase mugs that are meant to be used for sublimation. Not
Yep.
any old mug or cup is going to work. You want to search for like mugs and water bottles and things that specifically say that they can be used with sublimation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, consult your craft stores.
Yes, yes. Craft stores will definitely have this kind of supplies.
Yes. Hello, fur baby.
Yeah.
She's got a
Um,
lot to say about the merch talk.
I know. And I know you're not a cricket person, but since I am a cricket person,
Okay.
I will also say that if you have a cricket, you can do this same kind of thing. Same kind of thing that I actually did on this keychain that I showed earlier, where it's just
Mm-hmm.
cut out vinyl, pasted on a keychain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can buy permanent vinyl, cut it out, put it on a mug or water bottle. And then if you are going to put it on dishware, I would
Mm-hmm.
then recommend sealing it with dishwasher safe Mod Podge,
Yes.
um, which is meant specifically for stuff like this. And then you can also create these designs with vinyl in case the idea of like buying a mug press and doing the sublimation and all that stuff sounds way too expensive and complicated. If you're already kind of a Cricut crafty person, you can still make designs using vinyl. Um,
Mm-hmm. Did we touch on, since we talked about acrylic charms earlier, did we touch on things like earrings or charm bracelets?
no, we have not.
Okay.
We can talk a bit about that.
Well, I can't really talk much about them, but it is an item that is available through Vogue Race as something that you can get. They are little tiny acrylic versions of like their keychains, but they make them extra small to make into little charms to hang on earrings or your charm bracelets, stuff like that. I've seen that. I have not given that a try myself. I have considered it in the past. But also Shrinky Dinks would be perfect for that sort of thing.
That's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Just thinking about that because I saw your they look like D20 earrings.
they are.
Yeah, and I've seen D20 charms and also like potion bottle charms and things like that for pins and stuff. And I was like, well, those would make some very cute earrings.
Cool. Yeah. I actually do have some experience with jewelry making and selling jewelry at cons.
Hmm.
And earrings do fairly well. The one
Okay.
downside to like selling earrings is not everyone has their ears pierced, so that does kind of
I do not.
yeah.
Yep.
So actually, after my first con that I went to, because my first con that I tried to sell jewelry at, I kept getting that comment of like, "Oh, these are cute, but I don't have my ears pierced." So then the next con that I went to after that, I made sure that all of the designs that I had as earrings, I also had available as a necklace.
Ooh.
Because everyone has a neck.
Mm-hmm.
So even if
Well,
you get your earrings.
I'm going to throw this out there because I know I would be in the market for this, which means that other people are probably in the market for this. Clip-on earrings.
Um,
Because, yeah.
that's a question I've gotten before is if I should do clip-on earrings. But I just don't know if that's like a popular enough item because I feel like more people, if they did want to wear earrings, would just get their ears pierced.
I know I can speak for myself, and I've come across enough people, including Kathleen Illustrated, who do not have their ears pierced, but they want to decorate their ears, and so clip-ons are the best way to do it. I see a comment from Chandu. He says, apparently there are kits to convert earrings to clip-ons or ear cuffs. They do make those. I have used them because I have come across earrings that I really like, and I'm like, my ears are pierced. I'm not going through that process again. I'm just going to use the kit to convert this into a clip-on.
Yeah. I will say the other thing that kind of just makes regular earrings easier to do is you're definitely going to find like regular earring hooks and stuff at your regular craft store. I don't think I've ever
They have
seen
clip-ons.
clip-on supplies at the store I go to. I mean, I'm sure it's out there,
Yeah.
but just
They
not as
carry them
common.
they carry them at Michael's. I don't know about any other craft store. Michael's is the only one that I go to. But Michael's has both the regular old like hook earrings as well as 2 or 3 different varieties of clip-on styles. So it is worth looking at the jewelry section of your local craft stores and seeing what kind of like fixings that they have. If you are so interested in making jewelry for conventions.
Yeah. I guess another thing I'll go to though is if you're like unsure, like, oh, should I make earrings? Should I make regular earrings or clip-on earrings and things like
Mm-hmm.
that? I will once again go back to you can always try it first with like an online pre-order. And
Yeah.
that's a good way to gauge who's interested.
Mm-hmm.
If this is your first time making merch too, I know some people when it's like their first time trying a new merch item, especially if it's a more expensive one, they'll actually do a Kickstarter to make
Yep.
sure that they have the money they need to buy, you know, do the like 10 different enamel pin designs they would like to do. Because as I
Yep.
mentioned earlier, enamel pins can be expensive to make. Some of this stuff
Yep.
is not easy to make or cheap to make. So it can be a big risk to just kind of put all your money into it. So if you start
Yep.
with something like a Kickstarter where you'll know you'll have the funds you need to then create that merch item,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good way to start.
Yeah. That was actually how I got into the button game was I ran a Kickstarter for
Mm.
just one button design set. And like the thing about Kickstarters is that they don't have to run for 30 days. I have run
Yeah.
Kickstarters as short as a week. So, and I'm saying that because when I launched my Kickstarter years and years ago for the button sets, I was like, I just need $100 to make this one set. And by the end of the week, I raised like $800, and I was able to print like 5 other design sets.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Um,
So, highly recommend.
yeah, that's definitely a good way to start.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all right. Well, that actually, like I said, the mugs and the cups was kind of the last thing I had to mention.
Okay.
So I think we are about ready to wrap up. And I mean, it's almost been an hour anyway, so this is a good time to wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
But while we're wrapping up, I want to once again reiterate if anybody watching has any more questions that we haven't answered, please feel free to drop it in the chat.
Comment
Um,
section, man.
and actually, while we're wrapping up, I'll go ahead and do my promo stuff for the Columbus Cartoon Coalition, and I'll make sure to check the comments before we wrap up. But as for what C3 has coming up in the next few days, our next book club meeting is actually tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you want to join us to talk about Chainsaw Man Volume 1, you can join our graphic novel book club Discord. link down there below. We do one comic, graphic novel, or manga each month. And yeah, like I said, tomorrow we're talking about Chainsaw Man. And if you can't make it tomorrow's meeting, because you haven't read the book yet and it is tomorrow, just join anyway, and then you can join us for our next book for next month. If you are interested in just joining the C3 community in general, we have a Discord. It's a great way to get in touch with your local comics community, and get your questions answered and all that stuff. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any announcements for future live streams and projects and stuff we're doing, then also make sure to follow us on social media at c3.ohio.
And also do the YouTube stuff.
Yes, and of course, subscribe, like this video.
Yes.
Those things.
All that stuff. Yes.
Kelsey, would you like to say where people can find you?
Y'all can find me at kelseydcrawford.com. That has links to literally everything. My webcomics, my YouTube videos, blog posts, convention announcements, link to join my newsletter, all of it. All of it is at kelseydcrawford.com. I'm hoping to be posting more blog posts before the end of the week. Also, if any of y'all are in the Pittsburgh area, the Pittsburgh Indie Expo is this Saturday, March 30th. I will be there showcasing my work as well as hosting a panel called Waxing on Webcomics. We're going to be discussing webcomics during that panel. Again, that is at Pittsburgh Indie Expo, which is also called PI. That is this Sunday. So if you are in the Pittsburgh area, I hope to see you there. Otherwise, you can just find me at kelseydcrawford.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelsey. I also did realize I have one more announcement because C3 always has so much going on. The last announcement I wanted to make is that our next live stream is currently scheduled for Monday, April 14th. We are going to be doing a special live stream to help promote SPACE, which is the Small Press and Alternative Comics Expo, which happens in Columbus, Ohio annually, and is something that a lot of our members go to. So we're going to have a couple special guests show up to talk about what they will be exhibiting at SPACE, and talk about if they've been into SPACE in the past, some of the best memories, why you should go. You should definitely go. It's great. So please join us on Monday, April 14th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to learn about SPACE.
Yes.
All right. And with that being said, I think we are officially done. So thank you, everybody who is watching, and we hope you come to another live stream soon.
Yes. Thank you to everybody who left questions in the comments. And thank you, AJ, for having me here, despite the fact that I was late. I appreciate you being so patient with me. And thank y'all for watching. You are awesome.
Bye.